And welcome back to the channel, everybody. Here, it's Lucas Johnson back with this Emily Show 23 Custom League, or Emily Show 22 Custom League, excuse me. And now we are here, and it's time for the draft here in 2023. This is the year 2 draft of this series, and none of our year 1 draft picks have made an impact yet in the majors. Of course, we're not expecting that to happen immediately, but there's some really good draft picks in last year's draft, and so we'll have to see here what kind of players are going to come out of this draft as we get into year 2 and the year 2 draft of this franchise. So we'll go through it here. We'll go through basically the first round, and then some of the competitive balance picks as well. And then we will go over all the teams and some of the standout draft picks that we saw here in this draft from all these teams. And so that's going to be kind of the structure. So let's go to the draft and let's see what the draft order is. And the first overall pick in this draft is going to go to the Rhinos, the Richmond Rhinos, the worst team record-wise last year in this season. There's no draft lottery in MLB Show 22. So it's just the teams. It's just teams in the row of, records, and that's how this draft is organized. So you got the Spiders at number 2, Scorpions at number 3, Wizards at number 4, the Chinooks at 5, the Pilots at 6, Bison at 7, Blue Sox at 8, Las Vegas at 9, Jazz at 10, Cardinals at 11, Sharks at 12, Vipers at 13, Dragons at 14, Millers at 15, Expos at 16, Firebirds at 17, Vandals at 18, Diablos at 19, Sluggers at 20, the Rattlers pick 21st, the Bees 22nd, the New York Honey Badgers will pick 23rd, and the World Series defending champs picking pretty high in this draft, considering they just won the World Series, but they're picking 24 there. Boston at 25th, Kansas City picking 26th, the Arrows there picking at 27, and the Crusaders picking at 28, which is kind of low for me, lower than I expected, 29, and then 30 there for the bottom 2 teams. Nashville, the last pick in the first round of this draft. So here we go into the draft, and I don't do any of the scouting because that would take forever, and that would be way too time-consuming for me to do that with all 30 teams manually. So I really have no idea what these prospects look like, what the names are of these guys, and what any of their stats and their skills look like going into these drafts. So I kind of go into it completely blind, but except for the we have all these blue chip guys, and we know that those guys are going to be at least 90 plus overall guys. And so the pitching here for Richmond, I don't think it's a concern for them this year, really. I don't think they're going to be looking to get any starting pitchers. I mean, Michael Vann does look pretty good there. He does have a 2027 plus ETA, but they got young guys. They got Walker Buehler, Lucas Giolito, Jose Urquidy. Those are 3 still fairly young pitchers, not in their 30s yet or anything. So I don't think starting pitching is going to be a main priority for them. Now, catcher, you got Luis Campusano starting as your catcher, but Lance Saul, this guy looks like an absolute beast. I mean, 2024 ETA, so he's going to be ready to play like immediately. 20 years of age, has amazing contact ratings already there. He's already above average in terms of those ratings, and he looks like to be projected to be well above average with his contact, average with power, above average with his vision and discipline. That is very tempting. That is a really awesome player. And even if, James Snow here has 80 potential as well, but even if this team does have Luis Campusano, that might be the best player in the draft. And I think, and obviously you don't want to pick a position that you already have a ton of prospects at, but if you got a guy that's the best in the draft class, you might as well take him here with this number 1 selection. As we're still going through it, I can't remember. I might put something up on the screen to show you guys what the team's first round selections were from last year. I obviously know some of them, but I don't really remember who the first round selection for the Rhinos was, because they weren't selecting based off of what their record was, from last year like they are in this draft. It was based off of what the MLB draft was and the MLB draft order of the teams that I replaced. So I don't know when they picked in the first round. I don't know. I can't quite remember who they actually selected in the first round. I'll have something up there that shows you guys that. There's a couple of blue chip shortstops there that don't look too bad, and a couple of blue chip outfielders. But a lot of these guys have really far away ETAs, 2027 plus. And, the Rhinos are playing pretty well this season, and their timeline might have been kind of expedited here. This is a team that I don't think is ready to truly compete yet for a World Series or anything. But I do think they have potential to grow a lot, and they've already grown a lot, I think, this season in terms of where their team is at. Andres Guillen does also look like a really good prospect here. He's got well above average contact stats and vision there, and his defense looks okay. It looks about average here, a little bit above average. Those defensive stats aren't amazing for him. But, Darren Woodson here looks like he's going to be projected to be average at pretty much everything. Miguel Velasquez, great defensive stats, good speed, good stealing, but, man, those standing ratings are not really highly projected. So I kind of keep going back to Andres Guillen, and I think he's already 22 years old, though. And I just look at a lot of these guys. Juan De La Rosa is another guy that's 2024 ETA. He does look really good, though. He looks like he's fielding, looks pretty good, above average contact hitter. He's got a well above average power potential as well. But the team does have Marco Luciano waiting in the wings, and he's very, very close to being Major League ready. Look at second base. Obviously, you got Bo Suarez there in that position. And there's no blue chip guys at second base. In fact, the second base prospects there in their list looks really thin in general. So I don't know if there is really going to be many good second base prospects and players to pick from. By the way, here for reference, this is what Bo Suarez has done this season in terms of his development. 397 on base percentage and 852 OPS in Double-A. He's tearing it up right now in Double-A. Those are really encouraging stats and numbers for him. So, and then there's Marco Luciano, who is developing slightly here already, but has a pretty good start to the season right now with an over 800 OPS, and is a guy that is probably only 1 or 2 years away. And again, these outfielders, I just, they're going to be blue chip guys, but I just feel like they're going to develop too slowly. They're going to take a while to do that, and I don't really like any of them besides Andres Guillen. I do like him. So I'm looking at this, and as I was going through it, I was kind of narrowing it down to this pitcher here, who, Michael Vann, who is going to be a potential guy. They also have Andrew Painter on this roster, and he was a trade that they got last year. I don't remember who they traded for to get him exactly, but Andrew Painter this year has really struggled, and in fact struggled so much that I probably should call him down to Double-A. Rafael Santos is in Double-A right now. He was a draft pick from last year. I do remember that. So I think he might have been their first round selection last season because he's got a good A potential there. So they do have a couple of younger prospects on this pitching rotation, and I think overall their pitching rotation is very young. And you look at Michael Vann, a guy not a good strikeout pitcher, really. He's not going to get a lot of strikeouts, but everything else about his stats look pretty good. So right now, as I look at this, I'm kind of between Guillen, Vann, and even the catcher potentially here right now. And one of these outfielders is kind of what I'm looking at for this pick. And we'll see what they actually end up selecting and who they actually end up taking here with this selection, number 1 overall. So yeah, I just keep coming back to Lance Saul. He just looks like the best and most ready prospect out of anybody here. Got great blocking. I mean, even his defense looks really good. So yes, they do have Luis Campusano on this team, but you could find roles for Luis Campusano. You could turn him into a DH. You could even have him be trade bait and trade potential for you in the future if you do choose to do that. So I think there's ways to work around Luis Campusano and having him. So it's not necessarily ideal to have a bunch of catchers, but catcher it's a skill position, and there's not a lot of really strong and great young catchers out there in the league. So when you have an opportunity to pick one up, in this case here in the first round of this draft, I think you have to take it. And with that first overall pick, you have high scouting, potential there. And so you just pick the guy who you scouted the most and who you think has the most potential, the best overall prospect in the entire draft. That's who you go with, and that's who they end up going with here. So we're looking at the Spiders. Joe Ross has been pretty good this season, actually. I'm looking at their pitching, and Gunnar Hoagland has struggled definitely this season. But Joe Ross, this has been a good signing. He's one of those guys that I do think is going to be a trade candidate for them if their season isn't going that great at the trade deadline here and at the All-Star break. But I'm thinking about getting a starting pitcher for them. Gunnar Hoagland is one guy that is young and has some potential, but again, he's struggling a little bit right now in the majors, and a 4.84 ERA for him and 1.34 WHIP. You got Ryan Pepiot, Ian Seymour as well, but those guys are 24, 25 years old. Ryan Pepiot, another 4 ERA. Other than that, you just don't have really anybody else there. You don't have any other good pitching prospects for you in this organization. So Michael Vann is a very tempting option for them to take in this spot right here. We're not going to immediately jump to going with him right now. But also Juan De La Rosa is a little bit tempting too. They have Jeremy Pena there at shortstop, but Jeremy Pena has kind of failed to develop in this game. He didn't develop with you last year. He's in AAA still because he had such a bad Major League season in his first year. So that is definitely an option at shortstop. And here is Jeremy Pena, and he's in AAA right now. And, he's developing a little bit, and his stats don't look too bad, honestly. I think he's close to being. I probably will call him up at some point in the majors on this team at some point just to give him another shot. But, yeah, last year for him just went terribly, and he is 25 years old already, so they don't have a super young guy there in that position. And that might be who they end up going with here. And, again, he's got really good, well-rounded ratings right there, it looks like. But, you look at outfield. Outfield was another area that I looked at with this team. But I just think with the lack of pitching depth there for them in their organization, I just really couldn't pass up. What is the only blue chip starting pitcher in the whole class, which is kind of crazy to me. I don't know how many blue chip guys there was in year one for them. But, yeah, only one blue chip pitcher. So only one guy that's a first shot, for sure, 90-plus potential guy. And, yeah, he might start out a little bit low. Again, don't really, we're going to see these prospects at the end of here, but I do go and I change the ratings on some of these players, especially if they have really high ceilings and really high potentials. Jaden Hale, by the way, is absolutely going ham in AAA. But, yeah, only one blue chip guy, so that guy is going to be a really good prospect. I'm probably going to increase his starting numbers and his starting stats and everything. But I don't think you're going to be selecting pitchers until all the blue chip guys go off the board for you. I just think there's too much of a risk of not actually selecting a guy that you have, high draft draft accuracy on, and a guy who might not actually end up being that 80-plus potential that you're looking for here. So that kind of eliminates starting pitchers, I think, off the board completely for the Scorpions here, who drafted, of course, they drafted a shortstop last year. Or actually, I think he had to be a second baseman. They drafted Edwin Rios last year, and no, he was a third baseman there. Luis Rios, they drafted him last year. He's a third baseman, and he's developing already pretty decently well. We kind of looked at his stats already last episode. But they drafted him last year at, when he was a top 5 selection. So I'm looking at shortstop again for them as well. And Wander Franco is obviously super young and everything. And Ryan Bliss is also a guy that has some good potential there. So they kind of have some depth at second base. And I didn't actually see whether that second baseman has other secondary positions that he can play. But second base or shortstop might be an option here. outfield might also be a good option for them as well. You know, in outfield depth, we're looking at that, and I don't know if it's really that much of an issue for them. You know, I got Hunter Renfroe. Hunter Renfroe, the only thing about him is this is going to be his last year of his contract, so he might not coming back to this team next year. But they do have a couple of really good prospects. Dave Franco was a draft pick from last year that has really good stats. Damon Cologne is also a really good draft pick as well, or at least a prospect in this game for them. So they have a couple of pretty decent outfielders already on this roster. And so I did consider Andres Goulian for them as well. He was one of those guys that I looked at. But, you know, question is, do we want to add to their infield depth, or do we want to give them another outfield prospect and just have their outfield prospects be absolutely loaded? That would be crazy if we did that. They would have the best outfield in all of the minors, but we didn't end up doing that. We ended up going with Juan De La Rosa for them in the shortstop position. So he will be their first-round selection going at number 3 overall. So now we have the Winnipeg Wizards here in this draft selection here, their first round. And I believe their first-round selection, it might have been Steven Richardson for them last year. Don't remember if they had a pick before him or not. But he's been really good, actually, in Double-A for them. And so, again, pitchers kind of off the table with, you know, all the blue-chip guys left. And I kind of immediately went to outfield for them. You know, I don't know how deep their outfield is, but it's not amazingly deep. Victor Mesa Jr. is a prospect, but only potentially he's only gone down -5 in his contact ratings. The contact versus lefty is apparently there. So he is not increasing. He's not getting those big increases like we expect him to. So I kind of immediately jumped to outfield, and that was the position that stood out to me as a position of need for them. And Andres Goulian is the most ready, and I think the best overall outfield prospect, at least a guy that's not going to take you super long to be in the majors. And so for that reason, I selected him with Winnipeg. So Andres Goulian goes number 4 overall. Now, number 5 overall here is this team in the Portland Chinooks. And they didn't have an amazing first-round option, I don't think, last season. And I can't remember who their first-round selection was exactly. We might run into him here as we go through this team's prospect list and everything. Anderson Tejada is playing in the majors, but he's not doing really anything very good for them. As Cam Randall, and again, really just nothing sticks out to me about him besides him being a blue chip guy. And so, you know, I think, again, he's going to start out as a guy that's going to have really, really low stats that I'll probably have to bump up for sure when he gets drafted. Miguel Vasquez is a guy that looks pretty decent. He looks like a pretty fast outfielder. It looks like his fielding is going to be not too bad there in the 50s and the 60s. So overall, he doesn't have a super high strength. It's like Richie Watch. I mean, it looks like he's going to be pretty fast, but that's really the only strength that I see for him right now. These guys, there's not a lot really separating them, I don't think, and all their stats are pretty similar. Looks like they're projected to be pretty average with their bats and above average with their fielding abilities. So that does make this selection a little bit tough and a little bit of a chance pick here. You're just trying to get the guy that has the highest potential really at this point if you are the Chinooks. And again, it's between some of these outfielders here that I felt the most certain about that these guys are going to end up being good. And so we end up going with Miguel Velasquez here, who is a left fielder for them, 19 years old. And that does also factor into that, as the young guys have more time to develop. So Miguel Vasquez goes at that spot number 5 overall. And now we get to Charlotte and the Pilots here, and Charlotte didn't really have a great draft selection last year, I don't think. And so this is an important first-round selection for them here, with them being, squarely in rebuilding mode, as they got really good shortstops, Jordan Waller and C.J. Abrams already And Trey Sweeney is also only 22. So Cam Randall probably wouldn't be a position that they would go after. I mean, it says that they're thin at that position in their depth chart there, it looks like. But, I mean, thin is not thin in terms of their prospects, really. But the thing about Cam Randall is he can play everywhere. Basically, he can play all positions except for first base, it looks like there. So his position flexibility is definitely a plus for him right there. And that might be the reason that we're looking at him so hard here in order to select him. There's Jordan Lawlar. His stats are low 700 OPS right now. CJ Abrams has not been very good in the majors. Only 45 hits and 203 at bats so far this year. And then Trey Sweeney has also kind of gotten off to a slow start as well. So, I mean, Cam Randall is a guy that maybe you go to him for the position flexibility, but you maybe also want to look at some of these outfielders here. Semi Siani is a guy that has some potential, potential there in the outfield for them. Let's see, Luis Robert is really good, and he's got potential. But other than that, not a lot of depth, not really a lot of prospects at all to speak of in the outfield for them. And so that might be more of a position of need and more of a position that they target. There's a couple of blue chip outfielders still left out there, including Darren Woodson here. So, you have to decide. Do we want that outfielder? That's going to be for sure 90-plus overall guy between Richie Watts and Darren Woodson, or do you want to go infield and get another infielder there to help shore up that position with Cam Randall and take advantage of his position flexibility? And they end up deciding to go with Cam Randall here. I mean, Cam Randall, you can basically slot him in anywhere. The outfielders did look interesting to me, but I just thought Cam Randall can play outfield, so you basically drafting an outfielder in that sense where he can play that position for you, and he can also play some infield spots. So that position flexibility really made me go after him more in that spot. And now you have the Bison here, and there's only two blue chip guys left that aren't relief pitchers, and obviously you're not selecting a relief pitcher here this early in the first round, so it's going to be between these two outfielders. I mean, luckily for them, they don't really have a lot of outfield depth here. Andrew Vaughn is, obviously their youngest outfielder here at 24 years old, but there's no prospect on this team in their outfield at all. And so now you got to look at these two outfielders. Do you want Darren Woodson, or do you want to believe it was Cam Randall was the other guy, or Richie Watts? I mean, do you want Woodson or Watts here? And they're going to end up going with Darren Woodson here in the outfield. So that's their selection. And with that, only one more blue chip guy remains for the Chicago Blue Sox, who had a good draft last year, really, they did. They got Aldis Morales last year in the draft. And they also got another good infielder as well that I'm blanking on the name of right now, but we'll probably see him at some point in this roster. But yeah, this team had a couple of really good selections in the draft last year. And so I guess the only question for me was, well, do I immediately just select this outfielder here, make sure you get that blue chip guy, or you maybe take a chance on a guy that you have really good scouting accuracy on, but is not for sure blue chip player? There's Jason Dominguez, 110 at-bats for him in the majors now. We highlighted his major league debut. He had a couple of home runs in that game, but he's cooled off for sure since and hasn't been getting on base very much. Not nearly as much. He's already 75 overall, though, only 20 years of age. But I just think you can't pass up the opportunity to get the blue chip guy. You got to do it here. You got to get a guy that has, for sure, that, a potential. So now we're kind of in more uncharted territory with Las Vegas here, and now you're not relying on guys that you know for sure are going to be blue chip players. So that makes this selection for you a little bit harder to make in this round. As this team, they ended up getting Eduardo Venezuela with their first round selection, and he ended up being a really good draft pick for them. He's a good starting pitcher for them with great potential, over 90+. So now what do they do with this selection here, and where do they end up going? And there's some guys here that they have green scouting accuracy on, but not a lot of them have, the 80 potential range, and that does kind of hurt you Walter Bong, it looks like definitely going to be a guy that is a power-focused type of hitter here. But yeah, their scouting report isn't that great, honestly. I don't think they're very prepared for this selection. They don't have any other guys that they've got that screen scouting accuracy on that are 80 potential guys. So that does hurt them, and I think it might play into what this first round selection ends up being for them. And we're going to have to go through some of these positions, see which guys stand out. Well, Miguel Morales is a guy that, they have decent scouting accuracy on. That does kind of stand out for me. Maybe he would be an option for you with that pick there. Here's Harry Bourne, and he's had a decent start to his major league career. 764 OPS. It's better than I expected him to do, really, so far in this season. I don't think you need a catcher. And Miguel Morales, you could go after him. He is in that catcher role, but that's not going to be my first position of choice for this team. And so you kind of maybe look to infield here or outfield. Looks like you don't have a lot of info on some of these infielders here. Victor Garcia is a guy that is a potential guy, but you don't have great scouting accuracy on him. So I don't know if you would want to take that chance. That would be a chance kind of selection for you. So maybe you look to some starting pitchers here and instead, or other positions as well. But this is going to be an interesting selection and kind of a tough one here for Las Vegas in this first round. Now look at these outfielders, and Casey Simmons, Clay Davidson. There's a couple of guys that have 80 potential that look okay. The thing with Davidson is, though, he is just going to take so long to develop. He's a 45 overall projected guy, so he's going to have very low ratings immediately, it looks like. Alan Little is also a guy that you're looking at and considering. He looks like he's going to be a pretty good contact hitter, a good hitter all around, and there's no real differential on these stats, which kind of scares me off a little bit from him, but I think you look at the outfielders that they have scouted, and they have a decent amount of info on him, and they're going to decide to go there with that selection. So not super confident about that pick, honestly, for Las Vegas, but Al Little is their first round selection for them here at, I think, number 7 or number 8 now. And now we're looking at the New Orleans Jazz. And again, no for sure blue chip guys. Andres Cortez is an 80 potential guy that they have scouted in the green, so he might be a good guy to go with here with this first selection, or with this selection right now. Do they need catcher, though? It's definitely might be a position of need. Salvador Perez, 32 years old, 2 more years on his contract. He's a guy that I think we're going to trade. Probably not this season, but in the offseason, potentially. I could see that happening. So Salvador Perez, not going to be your long-term solution at catcher there with this team, that's for sure. And Andres Cortez, we got green scouting accuracy. I think you got to take that when you got it here. And they're going to select him. He's the number 10 pick. Okay, so we're out of the top 10 now. And we are on to Columbus here with their number 11 pick. And this is a little bit higher than I thought they were going to be, actually, to be honest. And look at scouting accuracy with some of these potentials here. And it doesn't look great for them. They don't have a lot. Okay, they have the guy, a catcher here, another catcher that has 80 potential and is kind of a long way off. They have some more guys here. Al Gilman, a first baseman, a couple of first basemen. Actually, it looks like they scouted that position a decent amount, actually. And they have Yuli Gurriel there at first base. I don't know if they have any other prospects that can really play first base for them. Tom Park is also maybe an option with 80. So they do have some guys that they have decently scouted here that are 80 potential guys. Oliver Saucedo is another one. And they selected Robbie Worre, I think, in the first round. That was the Jazz. The Jazz selected Robbie Worre in the first round of last year's draft. Not sure who this Columbus team drafted last year, actually. But, you got Hunter Green, Matt Tabor, Bryce Jarvis. This pitching is actually pretty decent. Matt Tabor has been really good in AAA so far this year, actually. And then Ryan Cusick is only 23 years old as well. So honestly, Gianco Varga, I think he was a draft pick from last year for them. So I don't hate where their starting pitching is at. I think their starting pitching is at a good place. Hunter Greene has been really good this year. This is an awesome start for him. He has a potential right now. And Hawk Manoah is 25 years old. So starting pitching, I mean, out of position of need, but I do like Oliver Saucedo, who looks like a very well-rounded pitcher, above average with the K per 9, and above average pretty much all across the board. 93-mile-an-hour fastball there. That's what it looks like, and we are going to end up taking him here, starting pitcher, with that first-round selection for Columbus. And now we get to San Diego and the Sharks. And they do have a guy who they've got green scouting accuracy for, who has 80 potential. That's Victor Morales, first baseman, who doesn't appear to do anything all that special. His defense isn't anything special either. And he is a 45 overall, so very low overall to start with. But it is the only guy that they have in the green and has 80 potential, so that might just be enough to get him selected. Victor Garcia was a guy that we kind of were coming back to with the Vegas selection, and he's still looks pretty decent, actually. It looks like he could be an option for this round in this selection for San Diego. And they kind of look at some of these pitchers here. I don't know, pitching is a real big concern for them at the moment. And first base, they just got Trey Mancini, and he's been awesome this year for them, but they don't have any other guys to back Mancini up. They don't have any prospects really at that position. Trey Mancini, though, 435 on base percentage. That's absolutely insane. Wow. And so you just go with that first baseman here because you got that scouting accuracy on him. That's very tempting, and that might be what they end up doing. And yeah, then that's what they're going to end up doing here. That green scouting accuracy, it's not a guarantee that he's going to be an over 80, potential guy, but it just makes your chances so much better to do that. And so that's why we ended up going with them. And this team has Miguel Morales as a catcher that doesn't look bad here, and they got green scouting accuracy on him. Again, it doesn't look like he does that much super well. His arm looks really good, though, and it's going to be on a great starting point, actually. It appears that this scouting report is correct. So his defense is going to be above average here. And, most of his hitting stats are going to be about average to slightly above average there with his hitting numbers, so that doesn't look terrible either. And, of course, they got JT Realmuto on this team, but besides that, their depth at catcher is very, very limited. And JT Realmuto, let's see what his contract looks like. He's got 2 years left on his contract with this team. And he is a guy that could be trade bait for this team as well in the next couple of seasons. Right now, he's not really that tradable because he's just really struggling offensively. You don't want to trade him right now, but he is a guy that I could definitely see trading in the future for sure if he doesn't, or if he turns around what he's able to do offensively. And Sean Robles was this team's first-round selection last year, a potential starting pitcher, and he hasn't pitched very much in AA, but he's pitching pretty well, and I'm excited about what he can turn into. Gavin Williams, his ERA has only gotten worse since we saw him in just the last episode. But you're looking at the pitchers. I don't really like any of these pitchers a ton. So we'll see if they just end up going with the catcher here or not. Yeah, and again, I think catcher is a position of need for them, and they have a decent scouting report on Miguel Morales, so I don't think you want to pass that up. So he goes 13th overall. And we already have had a lot of catchers drafted. I think Miguel Morales is our third or fourth catcher drafted here already in the first round, which is very interesting, and that's a good sign. Hopefully, some of those guys pan out, and they end up being really good prospects for us, and we got a good catching class. And now we get to the Dragons here, and I don't remember their first-round selection. I think it was Julio Gonzalez, the closing pitcher, who is really insane. He's like one of the best closing pitcher prospects in the league. And that was their first-round selection. And then they struck gold with the best pick of the entire draft, considering where he was selected with Wes Adams. That I'm still absolutely blown away by that selection that they were able to get in last year's draft with the last pick being a guy of Wes Adams' potential. And I mean, his stats are insane. He's batting insane in AAA. Can't believe they got that good of a selection there. So this is a important first-round draft here. They also drafted Robbie Matthews last year, who's got some really good offensive stats. I mean, their draft last year was just overall really awesome. You know, Robbie Matthews, good at contact numbers. His defense is so poor that it might take him a little bit to be in the majors, so he's going to have to start as a DH probably, but he's got an 861 OPS right now. He's hitting the ball really well. So, yeah, overall, this team's draft last year was one of the best that anybody had, honestly, in the league. So, yeah, and look at Wes Adams, already potential increase. I think we saw this already earlier in the season, but +7 and +4 to the contact ratings already. And look at these numbers, 483 on base percentage, 991 OPS, 30 strikeouts to 35 walks. 35 walks already is ridiculous. 483 on base percentage. These are some of the best numbers I've ever seen anybody have in the minor leagues. I mean, this is like, it seems like kind of historic stuff if he can keep this going. What an unbelievable selection right here. Wes Adams is going to maybe turn out to be one of the best picks of that entire draft last year, which is just insane. But, yeah, where do they go? I mean, this is a team that has a lot of depth, honestly, in a lot of positions, I think. And a team that has prospects basically everywhere you look and a lot of young guys on it. They also have Curtis Mead, and he's a guy that's around the corner to being a major league player. And they also, I mean, when you mentioned Robbie Matthews, but Homer Evans is around the corner. Michael Busch is only 25 years old. Josh Jung is only 25 years old. Colson Montgomery has big potential. He's a guy that could be in the majors pretty soon for them as well. And so I think overall, just you look at a team, Brennan Davis is also on this team, and he is maybe getting close. So they just prospects everywhere. They also have Christian Pache, who's only 24 years old in this game. So a lot of young talent here on this team. One of the deeper rosters in baseball. So how do they improve on it here is the question with this draft. And can they do that well? They look to the outfield guys to do it. Martin Lozano looks like a guy with really high contact ceiling here with what his scouting report looks like. And so he's going to be their selection here at number 15 overall. And hopefully they strike gold again with him. So we get to the Millers right in the middle section, in the middle portion of this first round. And we'll see what they can do here. Clay Davidson is still on the board. He's got a good scouting report by every team that we've seen scout him, so he's going to be probably definitely an option. There's also Bong. Now, we saw another team that had him only at 75 potential. This team now has him at 80 potential, 2026 MLB ETA, and an elite contact hitter with really above average speed, above average discipline. Defense looks pretty good. So that's definitely intriguing there to maybe go after him. But I don't remember if the other team had a better scouting report on him. So, you know, and it's interesting to see this. You know, obviously you wouldn't get this kind of a deep drafting experience if you just did it with one team. But selecting with multiple teams and every 30 teams means that you get a pretty decent comprehension of how these players look for every team in the league. Look at those pitching. Pedro Valsmil is probably the best starting pitcher prospect on this team, but he's not like amazing or anything. He's only got B potential. So starting pitching is definitely a place that they can improve upon here. Reed Medwick looks pretty decent, above average with the walk per nine stats. And I do actually like where his pitching is at here. His starting pitcher, 19 years old, and they're going to go with him. I think starting pitching for them is a position where they kind of lack depth. So they get him. Now we move on to the Montreal Expos, who look to improve their roster here with an important draft. And I don't think they drafted very highly last year. I don't think they had a super successful draft a year ago. So definitely want to improve on that draft. And look at Chris Reeves. He's got some good contact ratings there. I like kind of where his starting position is at. Jess Roman is another first baseman that they looked at and that they have some information on. So maybe first base is a position that they're looking to improve upon here with their team. And they have some pitchers that they have okay scouting reports on, but not amazing scouting reports on. Bryce Anderson, 75 potential. I don't know about that there at catcher here. Catcher might be a position that you might want. But first base, Joey Votto, 39 years old, on the verge of retiring, and they have nobody behind him. So first base is actually a position that they might need, and they might look to Jess Roman to fill that. He can also play second base, which is a plus, a little bit of position flexibility there. And Chris Reese can play the outfield, but I mean, Chris Reese, he looks like an offensive stud. His offensive ratings look like they're absolutely insane. So that is a good scouting report, but it might not pan out that way when you actually draft him. Joey Votto's got a 345 on base percentage, which actually isn't bad at all. But yeah, is Chris Reese really going to have above average, well above average hitting and well above average power? And that's the question. He's going to be not great defensively there. Looks like the defense is going to be a weakness for him, but the offense is really intriguing. And maybe intriguing enough that this team is going to draft him. And that's what they're going to end up doing here. They end up going with Chris Reese. So hopefully those offensive ratings here for him actually pan out, and that's what he ends up being in real time. And so now we go to the Firebirds here. Obviously, monster year for Toronto with Shohei Ohtani in his final year of his contract, on the verge of potentially leaving this team if they can't make a playoff run. Carlos Nunez, no way that is true there. Any potential. I would never draft a guy that is an 80 potential and also an 80 overall, because that draft report never would pan out. And so that really scares me off from selecting a guy like that. This team has basically nobody in terms of prospects, draft-wise and prospect-wise. Derek Ojeda is super far off from ever pitching in the majors. So starting pitching, definitely a position that you want to look to and maybe get here. And they're going to end up going with Douglas Yabu, who's already 23 years old. So an older prospect for sure, but just so thin with starting pitching that is what they go with. While this team, the Vandals, have nobody that they have a lot of scouting information on, that's kind of unfortunate. That's going to limit what they go with here and what their selection is, really. So, man, we'll see. I don't want to start selecting guys that have 75 potential yet. I want to shoot for guys that have 80-plus potential, but with this team, there's just not a lot of guys that have that potential range that they really have good scouting reports on. James Snow is a first baseman that looks pretty good. I mean, I don't know. Those hitting ratings are probably not going to end up being as good as they actually are there for him, but he is an option at first base. I think it's too early to go with a relief pitcher here, but yeah, the first baseman, a couple of first baseman options for them, maybe. Some catchers, not many of them I'm super high on here, but they do have a couple. They have 3 catchers here that have 80 potential that are going to be options for them. And, they got Anthony Rizzo, Eric Hosmer, not a lot of depth in terms of first base for them. So that is definitely a position of need. And that might be what they go with here, a guy at first base for them. And, there also is some outfielders here that are interesting. One of them is Ryan Wheeler, who's got 80 potential. He's a left fielder, 19 years old. He's got a good ETA, actually. His ETA is, 2025. And this team does have Benny Montgomery in the outfielder. He's, in the outfield, he's a young outfielder that they have on their roster. But really, outside of him, there's not a lot there in terms of outfield depth on that team. And so they end up going and picking an outfielder there. And I was definitely considering a first baseman for them. But they end up going the outfield route. Jamal Stein might be a interesting pick there, a center fielder. They have green scouting accuracy on him, and he's got 80 potential there. It looks like some of his stats are pretty good. Charles Parks, 70 overall. He doesn't have green scouting accuracy, but it looks like he is really good at getting some strikeouts. That's definitely a big part of his game, and he looks like he's going to be pretty good right out of the gate. And, you know, you look at this pitching staff, and it's not that great. I mean, Will Bednar is really the only, you know, young pitcher of note that this team has. So, starting pitching, definitely an option. Charles Parks is definitely an option there. But, you know, do you want to go with him? It looks like they scouted center field really heavily in this draft, and outfield just in general. Because they also have Tom Park here, who's not necessarily great at anything. Nothing really stands out about him. But, you know, Jamal Stein, a very high contact outfielder there. So, yeah, they definitely scouted outfield pretty hard. And, you know, they have Robert Hassell, who is actually not hitting the ball against lefties well, apparently. I mean, he's batting .305 this year. I kind of find that hard to believe that he's going down that much. But Sal Frelick and J.J. Bleday are those other outfielders. Honestly, they have a good amount of young outfielders on this team. So, I don't know. Is outfield really a position of need for them to go after? I think I would much rather try and have them go after a starting pitcher here. But, you know, do we trust the scouting report on Charles Parks? I think it's just too good, a little bit too good to pass up for him, just with where he is projected to be at being already a 70 overall, and so they do end up selecting him here in this first round. And they drafted Elvis Martinez in the first round at shortstop last year. And there's still Jamal Stein, and this is a second straight team that has had green scouting accuracy in him, where he is an 80 overall, so he might actually be a legit, really good player here for them. Julian Rosario doesn't look too bad either. He's got some good hitting ratings, and he looks like he has actually got some decent speed. But this team does have Ivan Herrera at catcher, who is actually hitting the ball really well this season. But I don't know. Ivan Herrera isn't super close to the majors, to be honest with you there. They also have Freddie Warren here in right field that they have some green scouting accuracy on, and he looks like a contact hitter for sure. That's where his strengths seem to lie. But I think I like looking at some of these outfielders here. I mean, this team isn't deep in that position in terms of outfield. Julio Rodriguez is really their only young outfielder that they got. So outfield is definitely a position that they might want to go after. And again, Jamal Stein, I mean, look at, he's got above average speed, and division and discipline look like they're really good too. But Freddie Warren, he also looks really good. He's got a 2026 LBATA, so it's kind of between these two outfielders for me at the moment here. We'll see which one they end up going with. So they're going to end up going with Jamal Stein here for their pick at number 20. So that's a outfielder that they go with there. And I mean, I think those two players pretty comparable. We should probably definitely try and compare those two outfielders when this draft is over. I'm very interested to see kind of the difference in those players there. But you look at the Colorado Rattlers now, who are selecting here in this spot at number 21 overall. And the only 80 potential guy that they have scouted in the green for accuracy is Clay Davidson, who is an outfielder for them. I mean, besides relief pitchers, obviously. But there's also Kyle Saul, who is a catcher. Looks like a guy that's going to be really close to being major league ready, though. The overall being already at 70 and only 75 potential does kind of scare me off from him a little bit here. And this is a green scouting accuracy, so it looks like, you know, that's you want to maybe trust that a bit more. And I mean, Francisco Mejia isn't really young. I guess he's 27, which is, I mean, it's still young for a catcher, but they got Wilson Contreras, who's only 30 years old. So I don't know, is catcher really a pressing position of need? You know, I think it could be a position they go after. Francisco Mejia has really struggled this season. But, yeah, there's just not a high ceiling at all for Kyle Saul there. And so maybe outfield is the better place to look at here. You know, left field, not deep, not really any prospects there. They have Jackson Merrill. He's a shortstop, though. And then some of their other outfielders. Here is Look at Clay Davidson. Got above average contact versus lefties, it looks like there. Some of his other stats. Yeah, there's just not a lot of prospects there in, you know, terms of the outfield here. So it might be a position, might be a spot that they go after here with this pick. And I just think, again, just because of where the scouting accuracy is at with him, it's actually in the green. Pretty clear choice, I think, of what they're going to select there. Pretty clear player to pick in that spot and in that part of the draft there with that selection. So they are going to go with Clay Davidson, an outfielder there. And now we get another NOS team in the Salt Lake City Bees. Kind of unfortunate because I think that this team is really low in terms of their prospects. They don't have a ton here on their team. So, you know, it's kind of unfortunate. I mean, they got Jack Leiter, but that's about it. Sam Bachman does have some potential as well. But I think this team's farm system is fairly weak overall. So that is kind of suck for them that they're down here picking this late in the draft. But let's see what kind of players that they have on their board, and they're kind of focusing in on pitchers, or at least that's what I'm kind of looking at right now for them initially. But what other players do they have? Outfield, they don't have a ton of scouted outfielders here, and they really don't have a lot of guys, a lot of good players that they have a solid scouting accuracy on. They do have this pitcher here, Sean Martins, who does have good K9, it looks like. And he's got one of the guys with a higher scouting accuracy for them and is an 80 potential player there. So, and they would like, I think they would like some pitching help in that position as well. So that's who they're going to go with there. They go with that starting pitcher in the first round. And now we are over to New York here in the Honey Badgers. And Akara Suzuki, they have decent scouting accuracy on him. He's got 80 potential. Didn't see what his stats look like exactly, but not a lot of accuracy on any of these pitchers here. And I don't know, Art Payne, he's got an awesome mustache, but I don't know how much you would really want to trust this scouting report. It's not super accurate. They have some players probably that they have a lot better scouting accuracy on. And Suzuki is one of those guys above average in contact abilities. Nothing super crazy about him stands out, but he looks like a fairly well-rounded player there in that position. And he's really the only guy that they have. Now, you look at second base, they have Tyler Black here in the minors, who's actually a guy that's going to be, I think, close to being in the majors right now. Really good defense, hitting the ball really well in AA, actually, or AAA, at 867 OPS this year. So Tyler Black is not a guy that's too far away, I think, from Major League playing time, which maybe limits Suzuki, although I don't know what other positions he can play. He probably could play somewhere else, potentially. They do also have Jalen Miller, who played for them last year. Right now is not in the majors. He is in AAA at the moment, and he's got a below 700 OPS, so not hitting super well. But, yeah, do they just go with Suzuki here because of the scouting accuracy? That is, I think, a big question for them right now with this pick. So, Suzuki's also got some good defensive ratings here. He's at least projected to be a decent fielder there at second base. So that's where they're going to go with there in their 22nd selection, and I think I like that. Just got a guy that you're a little bit more sure on there. Maybe can have some position flexibility, but that you have at least a decent scouting report on. Now we go to the World Series defending champs and the Houston Reapers, and this season it hasn't gone very well for them right now, so this is an important selection for them at this point here, late in the first round. And James Snow is still on the board, a guy that I think has some interest from me, and a guy that has appeared as an 80 potential player on a lot of these draft boards, a guy with some high contact upside. But there's also some pitchers that this team has scouted fairly well. Omar Spanos and Rick Cordero, a couple of pitchers that they have that are scouted well. Matthew Liberatore is there on this team, but they really don't have any prospects to speak of really on the pitching side of things. So that's definitely probably a position of need and one that they might want to try to go after here. They don't have really any decent catchers there to look at. And, first base, yeah, it could be a position that they want to look at drafting here. Freddie Freeman, 33 years old. I actually don't know how many years are left on his contract, but, position that they could use a prospect at. So I think for me, I'm looking at it probably between the first base option and some of these starting pitchers. They have some outfield scouts here that look decent from Japan here. Hiroshi Suzuki looks okay, 75 potential, got a really elite speed, it looks like there. Decent fielding, but I think you want to take the chance on a guy that has 80 plus potential so you can get, more of a guarantee of a guy with high potential there. So all things to keep in mind as they look and as they consider this first round selection. But they are going to actually go with Suzuki there with that selection. I think just the green scouting accuracy on him kind of leads me to believe that that scouting report is fairly accurate, and maybe he is a guy that has better potential than we actually scout him for there. That's kind of what you're banking on if you are Houston with that selection. Now we're on to Boston here, the Boston Barons. And let's see what their draft board looks like. They have James Snow here still. And first base for them, it's Darren Ruff, who's 36 years old. They do have Dustin Harris, though, at first base. And, of course, Dustin Harris is a guy that has a lot of potential and will be kind of just around the corner for him. We highlighted him in a recent episode, a couple episodes ago we highlighted him. So he's definitely a guy that I think will have some major league time at either first or third base this season. Darren Ruff, last year of his contract. So first base might not really be a position of dire need for the Barons here. That might go into this selection here. Maybe you don't get James, or maybe you don't get Snow for that reason. But Rizzo, I believe he is also last year of his contract as well here, and he can play a ton of different positions, but fortunately the one guy that they scouted well in second base is not a player that I'm looking at selecting, doesn't have great potential there at all. So, I think James Snow might be one of the better guys on the board. It's just you have to question whether or not you want him when you have a first base prospect in Dustin Harris on your team already. And, maybe there's some starting pitchers there. I was maybe looking at some starting pitchers as well, but I do think James Snow is the best player on their board left, honestly, for that selection. And so, you can figure out what the position flexibility needs to be for those two players at first base, but I just could not just couldn't pass up on Snow with what he looked like and what he was projected to be. So they are going to end up going with him here with their first round selection for this year. And now we are on to the Kansas City Monarchs. Julian Rosario is definitely a guy here, a catcher that you maybe look at selecting. Art Payne. So there's another look at this pitcher who, amazing mustache, and that might be enough for me to want to select him. But, look at that pitching. They have a few prospects here on this team, but not a ton. I think you could use more depth there at that position. So Art Payne, guy with the awesome mustache, is going to go 26th in this first round. So we only have, I think, 4 picks left in this first round now. And the arrows are next up to select. And they have a couple of catchers that they scouted that didn't end up panning out at all. But they also have a shortstop in Victor Garcia, who doesn't look too bad either. And while I'm looking at relief pitching, because if you want to get a reliever right now, you want to get a blue chip guy. But I think it's too early to do that still. So Victor Garcia, you got Harlow Perdomo playing at shortstop for you right now as a prospect, but he can also play second base and he can play third base too, so some position flexibility with him as well. And Jorge Vivas is on this team. He's started the year in AAA, didn't want to be starting in the majors right now already. Tristan Casas off the bench hasn't been very good for this team here so far. But there's Perdomo. He can only play second base. It's his only other position that he can play here. And when you look at that, you have Garrett Ford in the outfield. Doesn't look like he's too bad either. But honestly, it's really only those two guys are players that they have a good scouting report on that I'm super interested in, realistically. So that might be kind of down to those two players here. Or do they go crazy and do they get a guaranteed 90-plus player here, be the first team to select a relief pitcher in the draft? And they will. Ben Bautista is going to be the first relief pitcher taken here in the first round of the draft. They get a guaranteed 90 over a 90-plus potential player there in the first round. Then we got the Atlanta Crusaders here, and they have some decent scouting on a lot of these guys, actually quite a few players in the green, including an outfielder there, I think it was, and that's a good sign there. Jose Calderon is somebody that they have some decent scouting on, and he looks like he might be okay. Jesse Roman, though, now he's going to start out with really low attributes, but you do have really good scouting accuracy on him, actually. So that is an option there with the first base selection. But Garrett Ford is another one of those players. You have really good scouting information on him, and he might be a little bit too good for you to pass up. You know, if you look at the outfield depth here on this team, it's not very great. There's not a ton of guys here in the outfield in terms of prospects that they can count on. So Garrett Ford looks like going to be pretty average to above average in most hitting categories. Doesn't look like he's going to do anything elite. But Jess Roman is also here, and he looks like his hitting ratings are going to be slightly, or at least project to be slightly better there at that position. So they're going to go with him in the first round with their selection. Almost to the first round here. Now we get to the Raptors here, and they don't have anybody that they've scouted in the green right now at the moment. That's a little bit concerning. I mean, besides, not even do they have the relief pitchers at least scouted in the green? They do. Okay, so it's only the closing pitchers, and everybody else, I don't have any other guys scouted in the green. So they're going to be kind of taking more of a shot in the dark here with their first round selection, and that might hinder kind of with their chances of getting a good first round pick here is going to end up being. But there's Kyle Saul. He's an option, maybe a catcher. But, you know, they have Nick Stedman there in that position, so probably not going to be an option. I mean, Nick Stedman is going to be a guy that's probably going to start next year on this roster. He's got a 387 on-base percentage right now, 22 strikeouts to 20 walks. Really awesome ratio there. So, catcher, not really a position that this team is all that interested in probably wanting to get. Dave Clem is a guy that has decent defense, looks like above average defense there, and an average hitter. That's what he's projected to be. And, you know, I've seen what the draft looks like in the newer games, and I honestly think the draft in, you know, the newer MLB The Shows is a lot better of a system than this game is. This game, the scouting is a lot more guesswork, in my opinion, here. You don't have a lot to work on, at least not as much in this game as you do in the newer ones. But I do think Dave Clem probably is one of their better options here with this selection, and they end up going with him here, shortstop at number 29 in the draft. And so now we're down to 33 more first-round selections to make, and now we get to Nashville, who selected Leo Munoz in the first round of the draft last year. He ended up being a really good pitcher for them with that selection. Prince Anderson, it was not really a name in terms of catchers that we saw come up often. I'm not sure if, you know, people just didn't scout him a ton. And there's also a reason why I'm kind of straight off of Kyle Saul, because they have only 70 projected potential for him and a lot lower of it overall. So I have no idea what Kyle Saul is going to look like, but probably a guy who does not have a great high ceiling. They do have Eddie Corona. You know, he's only 18, but he's really underdeveloped right now. He's really low rated, so it's going to take him a while probably to be in the majors at all. Mikey James from Massachusetts could be an option there at first. Starting pitcher, he's 19 years old. And, you know, they have Mackenzie Gore, Leo Munoz, who I already mentioned. So they have a couple of pitchers that are decently young and prospect-wise, but not a lot. So Mikey James might be a solid option here to take with this selection to get kind of another starting pitcher prospect in your farm system. But there's also Donovan Cosmo at third base, who can also play first base. He can also be an option too. And look at some of these outfielders that they have. Not a lot of outfielders they have a great scouting report on, not a ton of 80 potential outfielders either. In fact, Casey Simmons is the only one that has 80 potential that they scouted in the outfield. But I kind of go back to Prince Anderson, and he looks like he's going to be a well above average hitter in terms of his contact, and his defense actually looks solid too. It's projected to be, you know, above average there. So that was actually the first the last round, the last pick, excuse me, of the first round. So Nashville gets, you know, a couple of selections in a row, which I think means you can take maybe more of a risk with selecting that catcher in the first round, and then take a sure thing, and that's what they're going to do here. They're going to take a for sure blue chip guy, blue chip relief pitcher here in with this competitive balance pick that they got. And now it's up to the Scorpions. Only one more blue chip guy out there in the closing pitcher role, and I mean, do you just take him in this spot? I mean, that would be maybe the easy selection, or do they maybe go after somebody else? And I don't know if I'm going to show you who they selected in the first round. They selected De La Rosa in the first round, so they already have one blue chip guy for sure in this draft class. There's our Cordero, who is already 23, so the age is a little bit concerning for me, but I do like what his stats are with the pitching, and they didn't scout a lot of good pitchers, really. They don't have a lot of options there, so they just drafted a catcher in the first round, so this team did, but they just didn't look like they scouted a lot of pitchers there, so I wanted to get a pitcher for them with that selection. But how do the Vipers improve here, selecting a catcher last round? What other positions of need do they have? And they have some guys with some green scouting accuracy as well right now, including that guy who was a 75 projected potential here. And nobody else is, you know, 80 that's in the green. So maybe the 75 guy is an option, but they decided to go and pick the last blue chip option there on the board, and Sire Rosado, there was that relief pitcher there, so he's going to be the blue chip and all. Now all the blue chip guys are off the board here for the second selection for the Boston Barons, who went with James Snow in there with their first round selection here. So how can they improve on this draft class here? What are they going to look at here? And I would say looking at pitcher is definitely an option, definitely something that they might want to do. Danny Cohen doesn't look too bad from New York. Really above average walk per 9, which is a stat that I like to see in starting pitchers. So that's going to be their selection here in this competitive balance round. Now we get to the Chinooks here in their second selection of this draft. They got Miguel Velasquez with their first one, an outfielder. And let's see what they end up going with here. Not a lot of guys in the green for them. But now it's more shots in the dark, really, for some of these teams here. You're not going to have a lot of guys that have good scouting accuracy anymore at this point here in the second round. But Domingo Del Villar at first base is a guy that has 80 projected potential. Looks like he could be a pretty good contact hitter, so that could be an option for you there. No, he's not a shortstop, but maybe a shortstop is a position they're considering. And Leslie Flutie is a guy that's only 75 projected potential, but he looks like he could be an elite contact hitter for sure. And at third base, you know, Matt Chapman, I don't think he's going to be with this team long term. But I kind of keep going back to Leslie Flutie, and man, 80 projected contact versus righties. Those projected contact readings for him are really awesome, and I think they're too good for me to want to pass up now. So we get to the Sluggers' second pick here, and they still have quite a few guys with green scouting accuracy, which actually is going to help them with this selection, I think. And Freddie Warren is one of those players that I think I like him. He did a good amount here as an outfielder for them, maybe. Catcher here as well. So Kyle Saul, this is maybe the team with the best scouting accuracy on him that I've seen so far. And they have him only projected as 70. Julian Rosario doesn't actually look like a bad catcher prospect there for them. And they're going to end up going with him here at the catcher spot. And I think I like that. And they have an advantage over a lot of other teams here with a lot of decent scouting accuracy still. I think they prepared pretty well for that second round or that competitive balance pick that they had. So now it's the Monarchs here and their second selection of this draft. We won't go through too much of this here. We'll probably get through the competitive balance round, and then we might just sim the rest of the draft, maybe do a couple of picks in round 2, but that's about as far as I go and as I show you in these drafts. I don't want these videos to stretch out too super far, and I want to get to the, what these players actually look like after they've been selected. So for Kansas City's second round pick here, they're going to go with Marshall Trejo. And he is a right fielder. I believe he was an outfielder there that they went and selected. And so the final pick of this competitive balance round here is the New Orleans Jazz. And they already have a couple of... I don't know how they drafted a closing pitcher there. I don't remember drafting a closing pitcher for them. Andres Cortez is the guy that they drafted in the first round. I think that's a glitch because this is their second pick. They did not have another selection there, so I don't really know how they ended up getting Andres Cortez there. That's just a thing that happened with the game, a glitch, I think. But what are they going to do with their second selection here? That's the question now, and that's what they need to kind of shift to. And you look at third base for them, you know, they have Yoan Moncada, but no guys, no prospects beyond that. And so with the final pick of the competitive balance round, they end up going with that player there at third base. So we're going to simulate the rest of the draft here. So we only went through the first round and the competitive balance round, and now we're just going to take a look at what these draft picks ended up being, and we'll start with the New Orleans Jazz here as the first team. Now we'll take a look at some of these prospects. And again, so he's not actually showing up. So I don't know what happened there with that closing pitcher that it said that they selected. They didn't actually take him. Thank goodness, because I didn't select him and draft him. But Andres Cortez at 85 potential. Donovan Cosmo, 83 potential there. And then not a lot of great other draft picks there that look all that great. So, I don't know. These first two selections, maybe they kind of turn into some players that might contribute down the line. But overall, not an amazing draft from them. Darren Woodson, he was, I believe, he was a top 10 or maybe even a top 5 selection here. First round pick for the Bison, and he looks awesome. 94 potential left fielder. Kind of ignore what his ratings are right now. I'm going to be bumping up these stats when he actually gets to the Major League team and when he actually gets put on this team's roster, because those stats are really ridiculously low. But 94 potential left fielder, that's an awesome selection right there for the Bison there. That's really huge for them. And then they drafted Tom Park after that, and he's another outfielder that has 83 potential, pretty decent. Salvador Lopez and Ryan Webb, both guys with high C potential, so maybe could be contributors on offense eventually down the road. And there's Jess Roman, 87 potential first baseman. You know what? I'll take that. A guy with a little more contact, it seems there. Already got really strong defensive ratings, so I like that a lot. I don't really like the next two selections, but Paul Juarez there, B potential third baseman, isn't a bad. You know, I think that's a third or fourth round selection for them. Not a bad pick there. Prince Anderson, they swung and struck out on this first round selection. He doesn't end up being that great and only a C potential catcher there. Guy that probably won't make much of an MLB impact, unfortunately. They do get Gerald Hopburn, who is he was a blue chip relief pitcher, I believe, and he's got 93 potential, 63 overall. It looks like he's going to be a really solid relief pitcher for them. Josh Bennett has 80 potential, not a bad selection there, I guess, for them, but they did take a lot of pitchers in this draft. And they took a closer, a relief pitcher, and a starting pitcher as well. And then this team took a whole bunch of pitchers. They drafted Cam Randall in the first round, and he's a shortstop from South Dakota. Again, super underdeveloped in his ratings, but he's got 91 potential. And then they took only relief pitchers and closers and a starter after that. And Azola Garcia doesn't look bad. Alexis Ramos has high B potential, but that was a good first round selection for them at the very least. Oliver Saucedo, not a great first round pick for this team. They only had 5 draft picks total, which is really low. That's not a lot of draft picks. I don't know how they had one. It seems like they had one less than everybody else. But here's a number 1 overall selection in this draft. It was Lance Saul going to the Richmond Rhinos. And this guy, it looks absolutely insane. This is maybe one of the best, most complete players that I've ever seen coming out of your draft class in this game. This guy looks incredible already. He's basically major league ready immediately. 20 years old, 70 contact versus lefties and righties, 70 vision, 72 discipline. His fielding ratings are amazing. 76 reactions, 74 arms, 71 fielding. And he's got 94 potential. wow, Lance All is incredible. This guy is going to be playing in the majors maybe within the same year. Next year, he might get a shot in the majors. That's how good he is. That is an amazing selection. And, you know, again, it's not necessarily a position of dire need for this team, but I looked at him and he was just by far the most complete, well-rounded player in that whole draft class. I just could not go and not pick him with that first-round selection. And I'm very glad that they ended up doing that, even if, you know, position flexibility wasn't maybe ideal, but they ended up getting probably the best player of the whole draft right there. And Richie Watts is a right fielder here from Louisiana, and he's looks like an awesome guy. Got great speed, 84 base running aggressiveness, 87 steal. His defense doesn't look too bad right now, but he looks like a great player. Victor Garcia, 88 potential here as a shortstop. That's a great pick there at round 2. So they got a couple of really, their first 2 selections in this draft are awesome. Those are both going to be long-term contributors for them. And Art Payne with the awesome mustache turns out to be pretty good. Here, 84 potential for him, and has already some decent starting ratings that I actually don't think I'm going to really touch his ratings much going into the season. And I don't think I'm going to do much with Johnny Merced either. You know, not a lot of K per 9, not a lot of home run per 9, but the 70 walk per 9 is awesome. 87 potential as a 19-year-old. That's a good mid-round selection right there for them. Like this pick. Like this pick for the Sluggers. Jamal Steen looks pretty good here as an outfielder. Then they also got Freddie Warren, who's got 72 contact versus righties, 57 contact versus lefties, 74 discipline, I think it said there. So he's got some good hitting ratings. Both those outfielders with 86 potential. Those are both good selections. And then this team's draft was pretty bad, honestly. They got Ben Bautista, who, you know, we already knew, a blue chip guy, really solid relief pitcher here, closer. But besides that, the highest overall or highest potential they got was 78. So they kind of struck out on all their picks, really. Their draft wasn't that great. Reed Medrick, though, this guy ended up being really good. Not going to strike a lot of guys out, has basically 0 velocity, but got good walk per 9 already, 89 potential, so he's basically an 8 potential pitcher there in the first round. And again, they didn't, you know, he's not a blue chip guy or anything, so good selection there. Johnny Barnett as 80 potential is not bad. Honestly, not a lot of superstars in that draft, but not a terrible draft class for the Millers. Alan Little here, right fielder, and he's got great stealing and really good contact ratings already, 88 potential for him. There's a lot of good outfielders in this class. Walter Bong, incredible contact ratings already, 71 and 80 contact ratings. His defense is pretty bad, and you know, not an amazing ceiling at only a 79 potential, but I still like where he's at. And here's another good outfielder, Clay Davidson, and he's got 97 base running aggressiveness, got good stealing skills there. He looks pretty solid and an 88 potential guy. Kyle Saul, you know, this is about where you expected him to be. Got really good defense already, 82 fielding, 55 arm, 61 accuracy, 63 reaction, and 73 blocking, and 61 power. You know, if he brings his contact and his vision up, he's going to be a playable guy there at catcher. I don't know. His ceiling is not great necessarily, but I don't actually hate that. You know, maybe you don't like it as a second-round selection. Maybe you want to drop that guy a little later on in the draft, but don't hate that. Don't like this team's draft class here. Sean Martins is their only 80-plus potential guy that they got. Not an amazing selection there. Victor Morales did not end up panning out as a first-round pick for the San Diego Sharks. Doyle Sable doesn't look bad as a relief pitcher here, though. 86 walk per 9 already is kind of ridiculous, so he's got some good ratings. And then Roger DeGaudio is an 80 potential closing pitcher as well, but yeah, overall not an amazing draft there. Michael Vann was a blue chip starting pitcher that this team got. He's not going to strike anybody out. 21 K per 9, pretty bad for him right there to start, and I'll up that a little bit when he gets on the team, but he's a really well-rounded pitcher overall, though, all things considered. 94 potential is pretty good. Johnny Padilla, this guy looks awesome. 88 potential, and he's already a 70 overall. 77 hit per 9, 65 home run per 9, 69 K per 9. Well, I mean, he's going to probably start, and maybe he might start in AAA. Honestly, that's how good he is already. And then Casey Simmons, 86 potential there. So all 3 of those picks are pretty good. They actually got a good first 3 selections there with those draft picks. And then this team, the Expos, I believe Chris Reese was a blue chip guy. I think it would have to be. I mean, it doesn't have to be, but he's got 8 potential. He's got really decent hitting rating so far. His defense is very far along and did not develop at all, but 90 potential for him. Good selection there. Giancarlo Francisco, 80 potential there, middle, and then kind of back end of the draft for them. Not an amazing draft class, really. Andres Julian here, don't think he was a blue chip guy, and he looks really good. 76 vision, 82 fielding, so his arm accuracy is not good right now, but his contact ratings are really awesome, and his vision, discipline, and clutch are really good, and he's got a potential there. He's a 92 potential player. So again, another really good and solid outfielder there, and that's going to help them out a ton. Tommy Rush is decent there. Their other picks are just decent. And not a good draft here from the Honey Badgers. Akara Suzuki, only 77 potential, just not anybody really there that stands out. And here's James Snow. I was intrigued by what his profile looked like, and he's got great discipline, 60 contact, 53 versus lefties. Those are good hitter ratings, and his fielding, his arm and his accuracy don't even need to be that good when he's only a first baseman, and his fielding stats are actually not too bad. I really like that selection at 88 potential. That was a good pick right there. Danny Cohen as a starting pitcher, 81 potential, doesn't look too bad. And then nobody else really to speak of, but James Snow was definitely a good first-round pick. And then we go to the Firebirds here, and their first-round selection was Douglas Yabu, and he's actually not bad. His walk per 9 is definitely a little low there, but starting pitcher, he's already 23, which is kind of concerning for me there. It's going to take him a little bit. He's going to be an older guy once he gets to the show, but Bud James, that's a decent selection there. He's got 83 potential, not too bad. And then Ryan Wheeler here, not a great first-round pick for them. He's only at 79 potential, and their draft class as a whole, not anything really special. Dave Clem was he was the second to last pick in the first round, I believe, and he's an 87 potential infielder there, so he actually looks pretty good. Not a bad first-round selection there. Shane Randall was an 80 potential outfielder. And this is another awesome outfield prospect, Miguel Velasquez, with 99 potential. Wow, what a selection here by the Chinooks. And again, these ratings are not good right now for him, but I think I'm going to be increasing his ratings by, it might be like plus 10 at least, maybe even plus 20, because we had a 99 Leo Munoz, or not Leo Munoz, but Rios. There was a 99 potential guy that went to Garrett Ford. Doesn't look too bad either, but they had that 99 potential guy that went to the Scorpions in the last draft, and I know I upped his stats quite a bit. I'm honestly going to give Miguel Velasquez probably like plus 20 increases in at least his hitting ratings, because a guy that has 99 potential probably shouldn't be starting out as a 50 overall in this game, and he's got amazing speed as well. So, man, Miguel Velasquez, he is going to be a superstar and the only 99 potential guy that we've seen so far in this class. So now we have the Dragons, and last year's draft was unbelievable for them. This year, they struck gold again with this first-round selection. Martin Lozano, right fielder, 8 potential, amazing contact ratings already, 64 and 69. 68 clutch is awesome there, 90 potential, so they got a potential player in the first round of the draft. Even when they drafted kind of in the middle, they did not have a guaranteed blue chip guy. Martin Lozano was a really good selection. He was the only 90 guy, only really guy of big significance for them, but that's still a good selection. Speaking of a good selection, look at Juan De La Rosa from Panama. His hitting ratings are awesome. I'm not even going to change any of his stats at all. I mean, he's got 92 potential, but got really good power already, really good speed and stealing stats there, and his fielding is really developed as well, and he's only 19. That's an awesome first-round pick, one of the better guys in this whole class. And then Ronnie Cox is, their second to last round selection here in this draft, and he's an 89 potential right fielder. So that's an awesome pick right there. Second to last selection of their draft, and they ended up striking gold there and getting Ronnie Cox, a great-looking outfielder. So they have Juan De La Rosa now at shortstop. They have their infield room and their infield prospects are kind of getting more loaded now because that guy is going to be ready to play in a couple of years, maybe only one. And this team, thank goodness that their last selection in this draft was really good. Omar Spanos looks pretty awesome here at an 87 potential because the rest of their draft kind of sucked. I mean, they didn't draft any deep potential guys, but nobody else of note there that they selected. Charles Parks for the Diablos here. That's not bad. First-round selection. Really good at walk per nine already for him. His stats are pretty developed, and that's good because he's only 23 years old. Dominic Diaz, 80 potential outfielder. So, one good selection for them, and nobody else really that amazing. And then we got the Vipers, who had a ton of picks in this draft for some reason. But Miguel Morales, as a catcher here, looks pretty good. 81 arm, decent blocking and catching ratings already. 87 potential. Like to see that. Cy Rosado looks like a good closing pitcher prospect here. 91 potential for him. Eric Gelman at first base doesn't look too bad. Super underdeveloped. Going to have to increase his stats quite a bit here, but 84 potential for him. Chris Ramirez is okay. Dana Graham, 71 overall beat potential elite pitcher. That guy looks pretty good. And then they drafted Jose Calderon, who is another decent-looking catcher here with beat potential. And then they also drafted Vince Graham. I don't really know why the game made them select 3 catchers here in this draft class. I don't like that because they probably should have spent their last pick on somebody else. And now, what do you do with those 2 guys? I don't know why the game had them draft multiple catchers like that in that draft. But both of them turn out to be really good catcher prospects. You're just probably going to have to trade one of those guys because you can't use them both. But we're back to the Jazz here, and that is a look at the prospects of this year 2 draft, and that's a look at the draft as we went all the way through it. Thank you guys for watching this one. No gameplay really for you, but this is an important episode to show you the future stars and the future potential players to look forward to here in the next couple of years. And we'll be back with some NCAA 25 content here coming up soon. The UConn offseason is going to be the next episode that I'll put out there. But I do want to thank you guys so much for watching this one. Subscribe to the channel if you have not yet and you want to see more videos from me. And I will see you guys later. Hope you have a great weekend here coming up. I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day, everybody, and God bless.